I stood in my doorway, the $13,000 check barely deposited before I found out the truth. My son, my own flesh and blood, had lied to my face over coffee, said they were drowning in bills. I gave him everything I had left from his father's pension. 3 days later, they were boarding a cruise ship without me. His wife smiled for Instagram. My son smiled beside her. And I, his mother, was left behind, not even worth a postcard. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The spoon in Marjorie's mug clinked softly as she stirred in the honey, her hand slower than usual. Across from her at the small round kitchen table, Kevin fidgeted with the salt shaker, spinning it in nervous circles. He hadn't touched his coffee. "Mom," he said finally, eyes darting between the sugar jar and her face. "We're drowning. Mortgage is overdue, utilities stacking up. Amber's been trying to juggle it all, but we're barely holding on." Marjorie watched him carefully. His voice cracked on Amber, the way it used to when he was 12, and lying about who broke the living room window. She didn't interrupt. He went on. "We just need a little breathing room, a cushion. I wouldn't be asking if it wasn't bad." The air in the kitchen felt heavier. Outside, the palm trees swayed in the Florida heat, sunlight slicing through the blinds onto the old linoleum floor. Marjorie set down her mug. She stood, moved to the drawer near the pantry, and pulled out a slim leather folder. Inside was a crisp cashier's check. Already written, already signed. She held it for a moment, fingers brushing the ink like it might burn her. Then she handed it across the table. $13,000, she said quietly, "from your father's pension. I've never touched it. Not until now." Kevin blinked at the check like it was glowing. "Mom, just make sure the house stays afloat," she said, not looking at him. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Amber appeared in the kitchen, dressed in a too-bright blouse and full makeup, like she'd forgotten this was a conversation meant for humility. "Oh, Marjorie," she cooed, sweeping around the table and wrapping her arms around her. Her perfume was sharp and floral, overbearing. "You're an angel. This will really, really help." Marjorie didn't hug back. She forced a smile and gently stepped away. Amber didn't seem to notice. Kevin tucked the check into his wallet with a practiced hand, as if sealing a deal. "I swear we'll pay it back," he mumbled. Marjorie gave a nod, half a breath. She followed them to the door, standing on the porch as they walked down the driveway. Amber's heels clicked cheerfully on the concrete. The car door slammed. Marjorie raised a hand to wave. Kevin didn't see it. The engine turned over. They backed out and drove off. She stayed there long after they were gone. 3 days later, she opened her mailbox and paused. Wedged between a coupon catalog and her prescription refill was a glossy envelope with teal and gold foil trim. She turned it over, her name not on the front, but Amber's was. She slid her thumb under the flap, unfolding a heavy tri-fold brochure. Royal Seas Cruises. Upgrade to an oceanfront suite. Treat your family to the luxury you deserve. Marjorie's eyes landed on the date. Departure next week. Her thumb brushed a handwritten sticky note stuck to the corner. "Mrs. Clark, based on your recent purchase, we've included a VIP room upgrade for your upcoming sailing." Marjorie stared at the flyer, her breath shallow. She sat down at the kitchen table, same spot as before, same mug still in the sink. She looked toward the pantry drawer, the folder now empty, then back at the flyer, her fingers curled around the paper until it crinkled. Fade to black. Marjorie had barely finished her morning tea when the knock came. 3 sharp taps, urgent but polite. She opened the door to find Tyler standing there in his school hoodie, backpack slung low, phone already in hand. His cheeks were flushed, not from the heat, but something else. Anger, maybe, or shame. 16 years old and already carrying more weight than his parents ever noticed. "Grandma," he said, stepping inside without waiting. "You need to see this." She followed him to the kitchen, where the early sun lit up the worn countertop. Tyler pulled out a chair and sat, scrolling fast. His fingers were trembling slightly. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to believe it either. Marjorie sat across from him, her heart thudding louder with every swipe of his thumb. Then the screen stopped, paused on a screenshot of a group chat. Amber's name, a blue bubble. Booked the deluxe suite instead. We're not slumming it just because Kevin's mom chipped in. I need a vacation I'll actually enjoy. Tyler's voice was tight. She sent that to Aunt Cara and Uncle Mitch. There's more. Swipe. Upgraded all the cabins. I'm not doing coach-level ocean view like we're some basic family. Kevin said we deserve it. Marjorie's throat went dry. She reached for her glasses with shaking hands, slipping them on to read the messages again. Each word stabbed harder than the last. Her eyes moved to Tyler's. You saw all this before they left? He hesitated. I didn't want to believe they used your money. I hoped Dad had something saved, or maybe Amber used a bonus or whatever. Marjorie didn't speak. She stood instead, walked to the small lockbox near the living room bookshelf, and pulled out her check register. Back in her chair, she flipped through the ledger until she found the entry. Cashier's check, $13,000. She pulled out her banking tablet, logged in, and there it was, deposit into Leisure Plus joint account date, 2 days after the check was issued. Amount, $13,000. She blinked, tapped the screen, scrolled. Dozens of charges populated the screen. Luggage stores, outfitters, airport parking, and then Royal Seas Cruises, $12,140. Description: Premium Upgrade Plus, multi-cabin reservation. A single sharp breath escaped her lips. Grandma? Tyler asked. Marjorie looked up but said nothing. Her silence carried the weight of disbelief bending into rage. A knock at the sliding glass door startled them both. It was Frank, her neighbor from 3 doors down, carrying his familiar green file folder, the one he always used when offering free tax help to neighbors. She waved him in. I got your message, Frank said. You said you needed eyes on a statement. She handed him the tablet. He adjusted his bifocals and sat with a huff. Leisure Plus account, he muttered. That's not a bill pay account. That's a recreational joint, meant for travel, shopping, discretionary. His fingers scrolled. Then he stopped. There he tapped. Royal Seas. Almost the full amount, plus 2 charges at a luggage boutique. You don't spend that much unless you're planning ahead. Marjorie's lips pressed into a tight line. They were already planning, before they asked me. Frank nodded grimly. They weren't drowning. They were booking a cruise. Tyler slumped in his chair. I feel sick. Marjorie stood slowly, crossing to the counter where she kept a neat stack of unopened mail. She sorted through until she found the envelope from her bank, still sealed. Her hands weren't trembling anymore. She opened it with deliberate calm, removed the statement, and held it up to the light. Every line felt like a betrayal documented in ink. Amber's Instagram just updated, Tyler said softly. Marjorie turned. He rotated the phone toward her, a grid of photos, matching rose gold luggage sets lined up at the terminal. Amber in a flowing white dress, cocktail in hand. A caption in cursive script. Family time starts with luxury. The photo had 4 people in it. Kevin, Amber, Tyler, cropped from an older photo to make it look like he was there, and a stock photo of a toddler that clearly wasn't real. Marjorie stared at the screen. Her face didn't flinch, but her voice was low and cold. Print all of it, she said. Every receipt, every message, every photo. Tyler nodded. Frank reached for his folder. I'll help you build the timeline. Marjorie's gaze drifted to the open mailbox just outside the window, then back to the photo. They wanted luxury, she said, quietly. The corners of her mouth twitched, not in amusement, but in clarity. They're about to find out what it costs. The chairs in Diane Willis's waiting room were leather-bound and stiff, arranged with almost military precision. A glass coffee table held neatly fanned magazines, Consumer Report, Money Smart Living, Florida Legal News. and a tissue box tucked in the corner like a silent witness to many messy stories. Marjorie sat with a thick binder clutched in her lap, her purse at her feet, spine straight. Tyler sat beside her, earbuds in but one barely lodged, clearly eavesdropping. His phone was on, camera roll open, screen displaying a series of screenshots with timestamps and usernames. The evidence they collected was growing like mold in a sealed box, quiet, corrosive, and undeniable. A door opened. "Mrs. Clark?" A paralegal stepped out. "She's ready for you." Diane's office was cool and spare. No family photos, just framed degrees and a palm plant drooping toward the floor. Diane stood behind her desk, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, a pen tucked behind her ear, reading glasses low on her nose. She didn't offer small talk. "What have we got?" she asked, motioning them in. Marjorie opened the binder on the desk like she was disarming a bomb. "These are the receipts. Cruise charges, luxury purchases, all made within 48 hours of my check clearing," she said calmly. "And these," she nodded toward Tyler, who slid his phone forward, "are screenshots from their family group chats and Amber's social media. They pretended they needed help with bills. That was the story they sold me." Diane flipped through the binder, occasionally raising an eyebrow, but saying nothing for several minutes. Then she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "They solicited funds under false pretenses," she said. "That's not just morally disgusting, it's actionable. Possibly civil fraud, maybe even criminal." Marjorie let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "I don't want to blow this up," she said. "I don't want to shame him. He's still my son." Diane shook her head. "You're not the one blowing it up, Marjorie. They already lit the match. I'm here to make sure you don't get burned." She reached for a yellow legal pad and began jotting notes. Her handwriting was fast and spiky. "We'll start with a civil suit, fraud, misappropriation of funds, and unjust enrichment. If they ignore that, we escalate. But first," she looked up, "you keep documenting. No phone calls, no texts. Don't warn them. Just observe." Marjorie nodded slowly. "I can do that. I'll draft a demand letter within 48 hours. Once it's served, they'll have 30 days to respond or settle." Tyler raised a hand like he was in school. "I can keep collecting messages. Amber doesn't know I'm in half these group chats. She just posts everything like she's got a fan base." Diane smirked. "Good. Save everything, screenshots, metadata, timestamps." "We'll use it." She stood and walked to a tall file cabinet, retrieving a thick folder labeled Personal Civil, Family Fraud. "You're not the first mother I've helped," she said, "but you might be the most composed." Marjorie managed a tight smile. "I've taught high school algebra for 35 years. You learn to keep your face still when everything's falling apart." Diane chuckled. "Fair enough." As they wrapped up, Diane handed her a copy of the intake agreement. "Once you sign, I'm yours. And don't worry, there's power in paper. And you've already got a stack of it." They left the office quietly. Outside, the sun was still bright, but the air felt cooler somehow. Marjorie took a moment to look around at the cars pulling in and out of the strip plaza. Normal people, running normal errands. Meanwhile, her son and daughter-in-law were somewhere in the middle of the ocean, sipping cocktails bought with betrayal. She adjusted her purse on her shoulder. "They don't see me coming," she said to no one in particular. Tyler turned to her. "What do you mean?" Her gaze was steely. "That's how you win." Back in Diane's office, the attorney sat back at her desk, flipping through the binder one more time. She paused on a photo of Amber holding a glass of champagne, the caption reading, "Manifesting luxury and leaving drama behind. Family first." Diane reached for her keyboard and began typing the subject line of the email that would go with the demand letter. Subject: Clark V.O. Clark, demand for immediate restitution. Marjorie sat cross-legged on her living room carpet, the afternoon sun casting long golden stripes across the floor. Beside her was the binder, now 2 inches thick, its cover worn at the corners from her constant flipping. The smell of toner lingered in the air from the stack of freshly printed screenshots, and photos she'd fed through her home printer all morning. Each page she slid into a sleeve had a number, a date, a story. Here was Amber, holding a flute of champagne on the cruise deck, ocean behind her like a postcard. Here was Kevin with a towel around his neck and a drink in each hand, grinning like a man without guilt. And here was the group shot Amber had captioned. Family forever, so grateful for these memories. Marjorie stared at it for a full minute. There were 4 people in the photo, same as before. Amber, Kevin, a grinning child that clearly wasn't Tyler, and someone cropped just slightly off frame, probably the cruise photographer. She slid the photo into the binder without a word. Her phone buzzed. Text from Kevin. "We'll talk when we're back." Marjorie let the phone fall face down on the carpet. Talk. Not explain. Not apologize. Just talk. As if this were a simple misunderstanding. From the dining room, Frank cleared his throat. He was seated at the table, glasses perched low, tapping numbers into a calculator. His laptop screen was filled with export logs and Excel sheets, timestamps, locations, merchant names. "Did you know," he said, "they withdrew from their cruise card at every port of call? Nassau, St. Thomas, Cozumel, 120 here, 260 there. Gift shops, spa appointments, even a zip line excursion." Marjorie walked over slowly. Leaning over his shoulder, he pointed at the transaction log. $1,084 spread over 5 days, on top of the cruise fare. They didn't just spend your money, they lived on it. Marjorie's jaw flexed, silent. Frank clicked open another tab. "I pulled Amber's influencer account off a public API. She's got 200 followers. She's tagging designer brands in her cruise outfits like she's doing it for exposure." "Exposure," Marjorie repeated bitterly. Frank turned in his chair. "You still want to keep this quiet?" Marjorie's hands slid into the pockets of her cardigan. Her fingers brushed against the corners of the demand letter Diane had emailed, and she'd printed just that morning, still folded, still unsigned. "No," she said. "Not anymore." She crossed to the kitchen counter where her pen lay beside the toaster and signed her name in dark ink. Slow, steady, unshaking. Frank gave a low whistle. "And so it begins." That afternoon, Diane filed the pre-suit notice electronically, time-stamped and served by email and certified mail. It was a procedural warning shot, legally binding, and the first step in holding them accountable. It started the clock. 30 days. Marjorie stood at her window that evening, watching a neighbor walk their dog past her yard. Sprinklers ticked in the distance. Everything around her seemed ordinary, serene, but her body carried a new charge, something under the skin, not adrenaline, not even anger anymore, something colder, heavier, a quiet purpose. She turned toward her hallway, then into the bedroom where she pulled open the cedar chest at the foot of her bed. Inside, wrapped in a cotton hand towel, was the last note her husband had written her, before the surgery, before the diagnosis that turned their lives inside out. She didn't read it, she just touched it. "I should have known," she whispered. "I should have seen it in their eyes." Behind her, her phone buzzed again. New post, Amber Clark official. "Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. No regrets. Ha, grateful heart. Her cruise, queen, family, above all." The comments were full of fire emojis, compliments, people asking for links to her dress. No one knew the truth. Not yet. Marjorie walked back to the dining table, flipped open the binder, and inserted the latest screenshot behind a tab labeled Public Narrative. Then she turned the page and created a new section. Rebuttal. The sky over Orlando had turned a bruised gray when Diane's courier van eased into Kevin and Amber's driveway. 2 envelopes, thick cream-colored and stamped certified mail, lay on the passenger seat like silent grenades. Diane stood at the curb, tablet in hand, hair pulled back tight. She watched the courier stride up the path, ring the doorbell, and hand the envelopes to Amber. The exchange lasted seconds. The effect would last far longer. From across the street, Marjorie sat in Frank's sedan. Engine off, windows cracked. She didn't need to be here, Diane had said. But she came anyway, not out of spite, out of clarity. Amber opened the door barefoot, her nails lacquered bright coral, a silk robe tied too loosely. The courier asked her to sign. Amber scrawled something without reading, already glancing over her shoulder into the house. "What's this?" she asked. "Certified legal notice," the courier said flatly, leaving before she could object. Amber slit the first envelope open with a manicured nail. Her eyes moved quickly, her mouth tightening, then curling upward in a humorless laugh. "She's bluffing," she called into the house. "Your mother's bluffing." Kevin appeared behind her, shirt untucked, face pale. He took the paper from her, scanning each line. As he read, his knuckles whitened around the page. Amber snapped a photo of the notice with her phone, already composing a text. Kevin turned away from the door, rubbing the back of his neck. "Amber, stop. This isn't—" "She can't sue her own son," Amber scoffed. "She'll back down." Kevin looked up at her, then back at the paper, then at the front yard. Through the parted curtains, his eyes landed on the parked sedan across the street, his mother's silhouette, waiting. He stepped out onto the porch. "Mom!" Frank shifted in the driver's seat. "Do you want me to go?" Marjorie's hand was already on the door handle. "No, I'll handle it." She stepped out, wind pressing at her cardigan, the smell of distant rain in the air. Kevin met her halfway down the driveway. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Don't do this. Don't ruin us." Marjorie's eyes didn't blink. "You did that yourself." He flinched as if she'd struck him. "We'll pay it back, just not like this. Not with lawyers." "You had your chance before the lawyers." Her voice was steady, almost quiet. 30 days. That's more grace than you gave me." Amber leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, robe gaping just enough to show she didn't care who was watching. "Oh, please. She doesn't even understand what she signed. It's a scare tactic." Marjorie looked at her son one last time. "Take care of your wife, Kevin. She's the one who led you here." She turned, walked back to the car, and closed the door. Frank started the engine. They pulled away without another word. 2 weeks passed. No payment, no apology. Only more posts from Amber. Horrigezio cruise queen swapped for party bar staycation luxury, posing at a local spa, tagging brands like nothing had changed. Inside Diane's office, Marjorie signed the final paperwork. "They didn't respond," Diane confirmed. "We file today." The motion printer hummed. Pages stacked like bricks. Diane clipped them neatly into a folder stamped Civil Action, Fraud and Restitution. "Once this hits the clerk's desk, it's public record," Diane said. "We're past warnings now." Marjorie didn't speak. She just placed her pen beside the intake form, like laying down a weapon. They walked the papers to the county courthouse together. Rain spattered the marble steps, the air cool and sharp. Inside, the courthouse buzzed with quiet energy. Attorneys in suits, deputies at checkpoints, the smell of paper and damp umbrellas. Behind a plexiglass window sat Lydia Hayes, the county clerk. Her hair was pulled into a severe bun, her nails unpainted but immaculate. She took the folder from Diane, flipped through it with practiced efficiency, then raised her stamp and pressed it down with a decisive thunk. Filed. Case number appeared on the receipt. Lydia slid it back across the counter. "Docketed," she said. "They'll be served by the end of the week." Diane gave a single nod. "Thank you." Marjorie stared at the stamp on the paper, a red rectangle stark against the white. A point of no return. She exhaled through her nose, a sound almost like relief. Back in her kitchen that night, Marjorie added the filed case receipt to her binder, a new tab marked Litigation. She closed the cover and smoothed her palm over it. Through the window, lightning flickered over the distant horizon, silent but bright. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. "Kevin, we need to talk, tonight, please." Marjorie didn't pick it up. She stared at the binder, at the storm building outside, at her own reflection in the glass. For the first time since she'd written that check, she didn't feel small. She felt like the tide itself. The reply came in a cream envelope, marked by the firm Taylor & Givens, LLP, and postmarked Downtown. Marjorie stood at her kitchen sink, peeling an orange when the mail slid through the slot with a hollow thunk. She dried her hands, walked to the door, and picked up the thick envelope. Her name in bold block letters. She didn't sit before opening it. Inside, 23 pages of legalese and posture. At the top, in crisp formatting, defendant's response to civil complaint. She skimmed the summary paragraph and froze. The funds were a voluntary gift from plaintiff Marjorie Clark to her son, Kevin Clark, and his wife, Amber Clark, with no written stipulation or expectation of repayment. Below it, a statement attributed to Amber. She wanted to help, she offered, we didn't ask. This was a gesture of goodwill from a lonely woman trying to feel needed. Marjorie blinked once, then again. Her hands trembled, not from surprise, but from insult. Later that day, Diane set the packet down on her desk, reading glasses low, a slow, cold smile spreading across her face. "Oh, Amber," she muttered, "you just walked straight into traffic." Marjorie sat across from her, expression stony. "She's lying," she said simply. "I wouldn't have written that check if Kevin hadn't sat at my kitchen table begging for help." Diane nodded, flipping open a fresh legal pad. "Then let's show the court exactly that." She reached for the evidence binder Tyler had helped assemble. "We have Kevin's text, the one where he said, 'We're drowning. I just need help to get the bills under control.' That's a direct solicitation." Diane tapped her pen. "Gifts can't be claimed when there's material misrepresentation. It's not just dirty. It's fraud." Frank joined them that evening in Diane's office with a thick spreadsheet and a USB drive. No utility payments were made between the date the check cleared and the date they boarded the cruise, he said flatly. In fact, 2 of their bills, electric and water, rolled over into late fees. He handed Diane a copy of Kevin and Amber's account statements. They paid nothing, not a dime. No deposits to the mortgage servicer either. That 13 grand went straight to cruise prep. Marjorie folded her hands on her lap. "Do we know when they booked it?" "Not yet," Diane said. "But I'm working on it." It didn't take long. Tyler came over the next afternoon and sat with Diane on the back porch, far from his phone and farther from any chance his parents might overhear. "I checked Mom's laptop before they left," he said. She had a window open, Royal Seas Cruises. It said booking confirmed and had a timestamp. Diane leaned forward. "Do you remember the date?" He nodded. "It was the Sunday before Dad came to your house." Diane's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That'll do just fine." A subpoena was drafted and served within 48 hours. Royal Seas Cruises complied without resistance. 2 days later, Diane laid the travel agency's confirmation email on her desk. Kevin's name, Amber's name, a full breakdown of the itinerary, and the booking timestamp. Sunday, 9:42 p.m. 3 days before Kevin sat at Marjorie's table, begging for money. Marjorie stood over Diane's shoulder as she slid the email into a new exhibit folder. "Let them say, 'gift,'" Diane muttered. "Let them." She reached into her filing cabinet and retrieved a copy of Florida Statute Paragraph 817 odd. 034, fraudulent misrepresentation. Then she flipped open her laptop and began typing the motion to amend their filing, to include a count for intentional deceit. "This changes everything," she said. Marjorie didn't speak. She stared at the timestamp. She remembered the night, the Sunday before Kevin visited. She'd watched Jeopardy alone and gone to bed early. No calls, no warnings, just silence. While they were on their couch, laptop open, spending what wasn't even theirs yet. That night, Marjorie updated her binder again. A new tab, Intent to Deceive. She slid the cruise agency printout in first, followed by Frank's spreadsheet and the utility statements showing 0 payments. Tyler sat beside her, quiet. After a long pause, he asked, "Do you think they'll lie under oath?" Marjorie closed the binder gently. They already have. She turned to the kitchen, where Diane's voicemail from earlier still blinked on the answering machine. Press play. I'll file the amendment first thing tomorrow. If they want to argue this was a gift, they're going to regret opening their mouths at all. Marjorie looked out at the moonlight catching the edge of her garden fence. Let them speak, she said softly. We'll bury them with their own words. The courtroom was cool and clinical, lined with oak paneling and government-issued art. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Too bright for the hour, Marjorie sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded calmly in front of her binder. She wore a navy blazer over a cream blouse, no jewelry except her wedding ring. Her face was composed, grave, not bitter. Across from her sat Kevin and Amber. Kevin avoided her gaze. Amber didn't. Judge Holloway entered briskly, robes swaying, his face unreadable. He adjusted his glasses and scanned the docket. Clark v. Clark, the bailiff called. Diane stood. Ready, Your Honor. Opposing counsel, a slick-haired associate from Taylor & Givens, nodded. Ready. Let's proceed, the judge said, leaning forward. Amber was called first. She walked to the stand in a fitted mauve blouse. Lips pursed like she was doing the court a favor. Her hand hovered for a second before she placed it on the Bible. She swore in with a practiced smile. Diane stayed seated, arms folded. Waiting, Amber crossed her legs as she settled. My husband and I never requested money, she began smoothly. Marjorie has always been generous, almost to a fault. I think she wanted to feel needed again. She tilted her head, smiling faintly toward the judge. Empty nest syndrome can manifest in odd ways, she offered. We accepted. That's not fraud. It's family. Diane rose slowly. Let me ask you, Mrs. Bite. Clark, do you recall when the cruise was booked? Amber hesitated. It was sometime after the new year. I'd have to check. Diane turned to the clerk and lifted an exhibit. Your Honor, we've submitted a travel agency confirmation email. Booking date, January 8th. 3 days before the check was written. Judge Holloway nodded without looking up. And do you remember Kevin texting Marjorie, asking for help with bills? Amber's lips thinned. That wasn't me. I didn't ask for anything. So, you're saying you were unaware your husband claimed financial distress to secure a $13,000 check. I don't handle our finances, she said quickly. Diane smiled like a lion who just watched a deer limp into view. No further questions at this time. Amber exhaled sharply, rising from the stand with a hint of indignation. Kevin was next. His walk to the stand was slower. His collar was wrinkled, his tie half-hearted. He looked tired, like the guilt was catching up. Mr. Clark, Diane began, can you confirm this text was sent from your phone on January 10th? She handed up a printout. We're drowning. The mortgage is overdue. I just need help to get things stable again. Kevin nodded once. Yes, that was me. And your mother gave you money because of this message. Yes. She didn't offer. You asked. He hesitated. Yes, I did. Thank you. Opposing counsel tried a brief redirect. Did your mother insist on helping? Kevin looked to Amber, then back down. She was reluctant, but yes, I pushed. That was all. Next was Frank. He stood confidently, even at 72, with his pressed shirt and pocket calculator in hand. I reviewed all charges from the Clark's accounts after the check cleared, he said. Not $1 went to mortgage or utility bills. The entire sum was routed through a leisure account and spent on luxury travel. Are you certain? The judge asked. Frank held up the spreadsheet like a war trophy. I'm a retired forensic accountant, Your Honor. I don't guess. A quiet chuckle rippled through the gallery. Then Tyler took the stand. He looked small behind the wooden railing, his hoodie swapped for a pressed button-down. His voice soft but audible. Diane approached gently. Tyler, you're here voluntarily. Can you tell the court what you saw? He nodded. They planned the cruise before Grandma even knew. Mom was bragging about sweet upgrades. I saw the texts. Did your father mention bills? Yeah, he said they needed help or they'd lose the house. And did they use the money to pay those bills? Tyler shook his head. They didn't even try. Diane paused. How do you know that? Because my phone gets the same notifications they do. The late notices, the shut-off warnings. I saw them sitting there unopened on the counter. Kevin looked down. Amber looked away. Tyler looked at Marjorie. She gave him the faintest nod, a silent thank you without words. Judge Holloway closed the folder in front of him. He glanced over his glasses. I don't make rulings off testimony alone. But I will say this. If this was a gift, it was one given under false pretenses, and that leans heavily toward misrepresentation. He tapped his pen once against the file. This case will proceed to evidentiary review. The gavel didn't fall, but the tone was final. Court recessed. People rose. The quiet hum of post-trial chatter began. Amber stormed out first, heels clicking like gunshots. Kevin followed silently, eyes hollow. Marjorie stayed seated. Tyler, she said softly as he walked over. Thank you. That wasn't easy. He gave her a quick, fierce hug. They don't get to lie anymore. She watched him leave with Frank, then turned back to the now empty witness stand. Soon it wouldn't be words and memory. It would be numbers, documents, evidence etched in ink. And then it would be judgment. Amber didn't wait. By the next morning, Marjorie's niece Rachel texted her a screenshot of a family group chat that had exploded overnight. The messages had Amber's fingerprints all over them. Marjorie's not well. This whole lawsuit thing, it's because she's lonely. It's sad, really. She's trying to stay relevant by dragging us into court. Another message pinged through. She's putting her own grandson on the stand. That's not love. That's vengeance. Marjorie stood in her kitchen, the light from her phone washing over her lined face. She took a slow sip of black coffee, then set the mug down without a sound. Across the room, Tyler sat at the counter, reading the same messages. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence was its own kind of disbelief. Marjorie looked over at him. Dinner, she said. This Sunday. I'm inviting them. Sunday evening came humid and tense. The dining room table, usually only set for two, stretched long with added leaves and extra chairs. Marjorie had roasted a lemon herb chicken and laid out cloth napkins like it was Thanksgiving. They came, not all, but enough. Rachel, her brother Carl, cousin Lorraine, and her husband Ted. Familiar faces with unfamiliar eyes. Hesitant, worried they were walking into something messy. Marjorie greeted each one with warmth, not defensiveness. Not once did she mention the lawsuit. She smiled. She served. And once the plates had been cleared and second helpings of pie passed around, she stood at the head of the table. I didn't invite you here to take sides, she said calmly. Just to see the truth with your own eyes. She opened the binder. Frank, seated beside her in a crisp dress shirt, flipped it toward the guests. These are bank statements, he said plainly, pointing to the highlighted lines. The check Marjorie gave them was deposited into a leisure account, not a mortgage, not utilities. He turned the page. This is the Royal Seas Cruises payment. $12,740, charged 2 days later. The room was silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. Rachel leaned forward, brows furrowed. They said they booked after the check. No, Frank said. They booked before. We subpoenaed the confirmation. Lorraine shifted uncomfortably. Amber said she didn't even know Kevin asked for money. Tyler cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. Wordlessly, he pulled out his phone and began passing it around. Screenshots. Text from Amber bragging about upgraded cabins. Another where she mocked Marjorie's coupon-clipping martyr routine. A third, time-stamped, read simply, "Just smile and let the old bat pay for it. We'll never hear the end of it otherwise." Ted coughed into his napkin. Carl's wife looked away. Rachel's voice cracked. "She sent that." Tyler nodded once. "She didn't know I was still in the thread." Frank slid the final document forward. "And here's the filing. They're trying to call it a gift. But as you can see, The story doesn't hold. The family sat stunned, shifting in their seats. Plates went untouched. Forks rested useless beside slices of pie. Lorraine looked directly at Marjorie. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Marjorie gave a tired smile. "Because I wanted to be sure. Not dramatic, not reactive, just..." "Sure." Rachel reached for her hand. "I'm sorry. I should have asked you before I believed anything else." Marjorie squeezed her fingers gently. "You're asking now. That matters." Later that night, Tyler sat beside Diane in her office, recounting the latest round of smears Amber had launched online, thinly veiled but pointed. Diane's jaw set tight. "Tyler," she asked, "has she said anything directly to you?" He nodded. "She texted me, said I was picking the wrong team, that I'd regret testifying against my parents." Diane didn't hesitate. "We're filing for injunctive relief first thing in the morning," she said. "No more intimidation." She tapped a document on her desk and looked him dead in the eye. "You're a witness now. You're under court protection." Tyler blinked, relieved, but also shaken by the weight of it. "Will they stop?" Diane leaned back. "No, but now they'll have to be quiet about it." Back at home, Marjorie stepped onto her porch with a glass of water, her phone lighting up with a new message. "Unknown number. You think you're winning, but you've just embarrassed yourself in front of the whole family. You're not a victim. You're spiteful, and it'll cost you everything." She stared at the screen, thumb hovering over delete, then decided better. Instead, she took a screenshot. Then she forwarded it to Diane. Subject line, "More words to bury them with." Diane's office was dim, but alive with screens. 2 laptops glowed on the conference table, paper stacks rising like miniature skylines. Marjorie sat at one end, Tyler at the other, both silent. Frank had his calculator out, the quiet tick of its buttons steady as a heartbeat. Diane leaned over a third chair, peering at a monitor she'd cleared for a special guest. "Ivy?" she called. The screen flickered and then came alive with a face framed by blunt-cut hair and sharp glasses. Ivy Travers, Diane's go-to forensic accountant, had the cool energy of a surgeon about to open up a chest cavity. "I've had eyes on their accounts for 48 hours, Ivy said, voice crisp, "with the data you subpoenaed from Royal Seas and their bank. And there's something you need to see." She shared her screen. A cascade of transactions scrolled past. Account numbers, dates, routing codes. Ivy zoomed in on 3 consecutive entries. "Here," she said. Amber's leisure account transferred $4,500 to a second account labeled M. Brooks. That's her mother, Marilyn Brooks. Then another $2,200 the next day, and another $1,000 after that. Diane's brows shot up. "They're parking your money with her mother." Marjorie stared at the screen, expression unreadable. "Why?" "Asset concealment," Ivy said. "If the court orders restitution, Amber's mother's account looks like separate property. They're trying to launder it through a relative." Tyler's fist tightened. "So she's stealing from you to give to her mom?" Ivy nodded. "Classic move. People think because it's family it's invisible." Frank leaned in, eyes narrowing. "They're amateurs. Paper trails don't vanish. They just get longer." Diane smirked at him. "That's fraud stacked on fraud." She swiveled her laptop toward Marjorie. "We're going to bury them with this." 2 weeks later, Judge Holloway's courtroom buzzed like a live wire. The defense had tried to delay the evidentiary review, but Diane had pushed back hard. Now, as the gallery filled, Ivy herself walked in. She'd flown down to testify in person. Amber sat at the defense table, scrolling her phone like nothing was wrong. Kevin sat stiff beside her, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Their attorney whispered furiously, glancing at the stack of exhibits Diane had laid out like a row of knives. "Call your next witness," the judge said. Diane rose. "Plaintiff calls Ivy Travers." Ivy strode to the stand, posture crisp, her black suit immaculate. She was sworn in without ceremony. Diane handed her a binder. "Ms. Travers, can you tell the court what you do?" "I'm a forensic accountant. I trace funds in cases of suspected fraud, embezzlement, or asset concealment. And did you review the bank and cruise records pertaining to the defendants? I did. Please explain your findings. Ivy opened the binder and gestured to a printed chart, a simple, devastating diagram of arrows and amounts. Within days of receiving the $13,000 check, the defendants transferred over $7,700 to an account belonging to Marilyn Brooks, the mother of defendant Amber Clark. This was not disclosed in their response filings. These are not repayments of debt. These are transfers without consideration, timed to avoid detection. The courtroom rustled. Diane tilted her head. Why would someone do that? To make it appear as if their balance is lower than it actually is, Ivy said calmly. So when the court looks for funds to order restitution, it looks like they're insolvent. But in reality, they've moved the money. Amber's attorney jumped up. Objection. Speculative. Overruled, Judge Holloway said, without glancing up. She's an expert witness. Continue. Diane pressed on. In your professional opinion, Ms. Travers, does this show intent to conceal assets? Yes, it's deliberate. The timing matches perfectly with the lawsuit being filed. In layman's terms, they hid the money. Kevin's head dropped, his shoulders rounding inward like a deflating balloon. Amber sat straighter, eyes flashing at Diane. Diane turned to the judge. Your Honor, we move for immediate bank subpoenas to freeze and recover the transferred funds. Judge Holloway tapped his pen, then looked at Amber and Kevin with a gaze that could slice steel. Motion granted, he said. Subpoenas will be issued forthwith. Any further transfers will be considered contempt. Amber's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Kevin stared at his hands, face ashen. For a moment, Marjorie saw the boy he'd been, the boy who used to tug at her sleeve, asking for quarters for the arcade. Then it was gone, replaced by the man who had sat at her kitchen table lying. Diane caught her eye, a flicker of satisfaction, not gloating, just resolve. That night, back at her kitchen table, Marjorie added a new tab to her binder, concealment. She slid Ivy's charts inside, one by one, like laying bricks. Tyler came in quietly, set a glass of water by her elbow. You okay? Marjorie looked at him. They're out of moves, she said softly. But even as she said it, her phone buzzed again. A new notification from Diane. Subject: You should see what just landed in Discovery. Marjorie opened it, her eyes widened, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. The headline ran across the top of the Orlando Sentinel's Sunday front page, just below the fold. Retired teacher sues. Own son over cruise betrayal. Fraud alleged after $13,000. Gift funds. Luxury vacation. Marjorie read it from her porch swing, the paper unfolded in her lap, the early sun just cresting over the hedges. A neighbor jogging by slowed, waved. Not the usual wave. Slower, respectful. Inside the article, Diane's quotes were clean and deliberate. This case is about principle, about accountability. The public deserves to know that misusing a loved one's trust has consequences. Amber's attorney had offered the expected counterpoint, claiming emotional misunderstanding and a family matter exaggerated by legal overreach. But the facts spoke louder, and the town was reading. By Monday morning, Marjorie's mailbox was full. Not bills or junk coupons, but envelopes with handwritten addresses. Dozens. Some had no return name. Others simply said neighbor or fellow teacher. One note on blue-lined paper read, You don't know me, but you taught my niece algebra in '98. You were fair and patient. Don't let them spin this. You're doing the right thing. Another envelope held nothing but a Starbucks gift card and the words, For your mornings, stay strong. She tucked them into a shoebox, one by one, careful as pressed flowers. In the HOA meeting that Tuesday, Marjorie hadn't planned to speak. She'd gone to listen, maybe distract herself with irrigation updates and playground repairs. But as soon as she entered the room, chatter stalled. Linda Becker, head of the HOA board and keeper of the neighborhood grapevine, motioned to her. Miss Clark, she said, loud enough to quiet everyone. We just want to say thank you for standing up. Not just for yourself, but for anyone who's ever been taken advantage of and told to stay quiet about it. Several people clapped. Others nodded. Marjorie gave a polite smile and a modest thank you before taking her seat. Her hands were folded, her binder zipped shut on her lap. She didn't need to prove anything tonight. The story had already done that for her. Across town, in their 2-story suburban house, Kevin stood at his kitchen window while Amber paced behind him, ranting. "It's not just local anymore," she snapped, holding her phone. BuzzFeed picked it up. BuzzFeed. "Do you know what kind of virality that is?" Kevin said nothing. He was watching the neighbor across the street, Mr. D'Angelo, who usually gave him a friendly wave. Today? The man turned and walked back inside. Amber kept scrolling. "I can't believe they used that photo. I look awful. And they linked to my public page. I had to lock everything down. I lost 4 sponsorships in one day. 4. She turned to him, voice hardening. "Fix it." Kevin looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. "There is no fixing this," he said. Back at Diane's office, the press clippings worked exactly as intended. She slid a folder across the table to Marjorie. "New calls from their attorney," Diane said. "They want to talk settlement. No numbers yet, but the heat's finally hitting." Marjorie didn't gloat. She simply turned to the next page in the folder, copies of Amber's sponsorship takedowns, screenshots of followers unfollowing, brands issuing subtle but unmistakable PR statements. "We are no longer affiliated with Amber Clark Official." Diane leaned back, arms crossed. They thought the courtroom was the only battlefield. Marjorie exhaled. They underestimated what the truth could look like when printed. That night, Kevin sat alone on his back porch, drink untouched. The kids in the next yard were playing tag, their laughter sharp and shrill in the quiet. He stared at his phone. No texts, no likes, no replies, not even from his mother. Amber had locked herself in the guest room with a glass of wine and her old ring light, still trying to salvage what was left of her curated image. But Kevin didn't look at her feed anymore. He only stared at one post, the Sentinel article, now pinned and shared over 9,000 times. His name in the headline, his mother's photo underneath it, and beside it, the quote that hollowed him out more than anything else. "You can lose money, but losing trust? That's theft you never recover from." Marjorie clipped the article and tucked it into her binder under a new tab. Public record. She didn't gloat. She didn't even celebrate. She just sat with her tea as twilight deepened across the porch, fingers brushing the page like a seamstress smoothing fabric. The next step was coming, and this time it wouldn't be fought with paper. It would be fought in person, because the final hearing was on the docket, and she would be ready. The final hearing was set for 9:30 a.m. sharp, courtroom 3B. By 8:42, the gallery was full. Reporters, neighbors, even a few former students of Marjorie's. Seated quietly in the back. No one brought signs or shouted, but every seat was filled with the kind of quiet attention reserved for the rare moment when someone finally stands up and does not flinch. Marjorie entered with Diane on one side and Frank on the other. She wore a charcoal gray blazer with a single silver pin, her late husband's eagle tie clip, repurposed to fasten her lapel. Her hands trembled slightly, but not with fear. This was the final mile. Amber and Kevin sat across the aisle at the defendant's table. Amber's hair was styled and shellacked, but her eyes were glassy. Kevin looked smaller than he ever had. His suit slightly too loose, hands clasped so tightly they had gone white. Judge Holloway stepped into the chamber. All rose. "All parties present?" he asked. "Ready for plaintiff," Diane answered, rising. "Defense is present," said the junior associate, who had clearly drawn the short straw after Amber's original counsel withdrew earlier that week. "Let's begin," the judge said. Diane stepped forward, her voice calm, professional, but with a force that didn't need volume to land. Your Honor, today we conclude what the evidence has already made plain. A $13,000 cashier's check was given under direct solicitation by Kevin Clark, who claimed imminent financial hardship. That money was then used to book a luxury cruise previously planned and later partially transferred to an outside account to obscure access, an account belonging to Amber Clark's mother. What began as a lie became concealment, and what followed was retaliation against a plaintiff who did nothing more than believe her son. She held up a single sheet of paper. This is the timeline. Dated. Verified. Request. Check. Cruise. Concealment. She handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. Then Frank was called. He walked steadily to the stand, briefcase in hand, wearing a plaid tie that looked like it hadn't seen daylight in years. He adjusted his glasses and was sworn in. I reviewed the financial records of Kevin and Amber Clark, including statements from their leisure and joint accounts, he said. No utility payments, no mortgage deposits. All expenditures align with cruise-related charges. The classification of this money as a gift is a lie. Plain and simple. Amber's attorney stood. Sir, are you a certified forensic accountant? No, Frank replied, but I did teach accountancy at Valencia College for 22 years. And this, he tapped the spreadsheet in front of him, is not complex fraud. It's clumsy theft. A ripple of laughter broke in the courtroom before Judge Holloway raised his hand. Then came Ivy. She wore black again, precise and no nonsense. Her forensic diagram of the money trail lit up on the screen behind her like a crime scene. 3 transfers, she said. $7,700 in total moved to a third-party account owned by Marilyn Brooks. Timing matches the filing of the civil complaint. This is intentional asset relocation. The purpose was clear. Evade liability. Diane asked, "What do you call that?" Ivy didn't miss a beat. Concealment. Prejudicial and deliberate. When she stepped down, the courtroom settled into silence. Judge Holloway removed his glasses. Kevin and Amber Clark, he began. You misrepresented your financial status to extract funds from the plaintiff, then used those funds for personal enrichment and attempted to shield them from judicial recovery. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Marjorie Clark. Kevin closed his eyes. The judge continued. You are ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $13,000. In addition, the court imposes punitive damages in the amount of $10,000 for deceptive conduct and intentional misrepresentation. You will also be responsible for the plaintiff's legal fees. Amber's chair screeched as she stood. This is insanity, she shrieked. You're seriously going to ruin us over a vacation? Kevin, say something. Kevin didn't move. Amber rounded on him. This is your fault. You begged her. You let this happen. Bailiff, Judge Holloway said, nodding toward her. Amber was ushered out, still yelling, voice cracking like glass under pressure. Kevin followed her slowly, head down, without speaking. Marjorie remained seated until they were gone. Only then did she exhale. Diane turned to her. You did it. Marjorie shook her head. We did it. Frank patted her shoulder gently. And now they know. Outside, the courthouse steps were slick with drizzle. Reporters waited, but Marjorie didn't stop for comment. She walked straight to Diane's car, binder in hand. Inside, Tyler was waiting. They really yelled in open court, he asked, wide-eyed. Marjorie nodded once, then handed him the court ruling. Add it to the binder, she said. He flipped to the tab labeled judgment, slid it in, and zipped it shut. It was over, at least the part they could fight in court. What came next would be about collection. And consequences. The court's ruling had been swift. Enforcing it, however, would be surgical. 3 days after the judgment, Diane filed the lien documents at the county clerk's office. The forms were thick with cross-references: property, banking, business. Each one a thread connected to Kevin or Amber. All were notarized, numbered, and handed directly to Lydia Hayes, who stamped them with the same firm efficiency she always had. Next phase begins, Lydia said. sliding a receipt across the glass. Diane nodded. Let's make sure every penny is accounted for. By Friday morning, a sheriff's deputy walked up the flagstone path to Kevin and Amber's house, with the slow, deliberate stride of someone who had done this before. Amber answered in athletic wear and false eyelashes, earbuds in. Her smile died when she saw the badge. "Ma'am," the deputy said, holding out a manila envelope. "Wage garnishment notice. Garnishee named as Kevin Clark. Effective immediately, served and acknowledged." Amber stared at the envelope, then took it like it might burn her fingers. Inside, Kevin sat at the dining table, working remotely. He looked up when she entered, saw the envelope, and let out a hoarse, bitter breath. "No, no, no, this can't be legal." Amber tossed it on the table. "Well, it is. Hope that cruise was worth it." His hands trembled around his coffee mug. "How much are they taking?" 25% of your paycheck until the full judgment is satisfied," she snapped. "You didn't read the court order?" Kevin rubbed his temples, like he could erase the numbers that were now following him through every bank portal. That night, Diane emailed Marjorie the update. Garnishment served. First collection scheduled within 2 payroll cycles. But the paper cuts didn't end there. The following Tuesday, Amber was pulled over by a deputy while driving back from her Stay Beautiful brand collaboration shoot. She rolled down the window, annoyed and confused. "What now?" The deputy removed his sunglasses. "Ma'am, your vehicle's title has been flagged for seizure pending lien enforcement. Step out of the car." She laughed, sharp, high, incredulous. "You're not serious. This is a leased infinity." "That's between you and the leasing company," he said. She stepped out, nearly shaking. As he clipped a bright orange seizure sticker to the rear windshield, Amber pulled out her phone and started recording. She uploaded it to her followers with the caption, "This is what family betrayal looks like. Justice fail. Free Amber." The comment section didn't turn out the way she expected. Back at home, Kevin came knocking. Marjorie didn't answer the door right away. She had seen the video. Everyone had. It was plastered all over local Facebook groups, accompanied by a screenshot of the court order. She opened the door slowly. Kevin looked thinner, more sunken. Like the stress had finally started eating him from the inside out. "Please," he said. "Mom, don't take everything." Marjorie didn't flinch. "I'm not taking everything." Kevin's shoulders slumped. She held his gaze, flat and unwavering. "I'm collecting what I gave you. The difference is, I didn't lie when I gave it." He swallowed hard. "I'll pay. Somehow. Just don't take the car. She needs it." Marjorie looked down at the binder in her hands. She'd just updated it with the latest collection form from Lydia Hayes. When she looked up again, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steel. "You didn't just take money, Kevin. You took my peace. My trust. You let her mock me. You called me family, then treated me like an ATM." Kevin opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Marjorie stepped back and gently closed the door. At the courthouse, Lydia Hayes completed the lien registration on Amber's Social Media LLC, now in default with 3 brands and under informal FTC review for failing to disclose ads. She handed the file to Diane, who placed it gently into the litigation binder. "Everything will be recovered?" Marjorie asked, standing beside her. "Down to the cent," Lydia confirmed. Marjorie exhaled. Later that night, she sat in her den as the rain tapped against the window panes. The binder lay open in front of her, but she wasn't reading it. She was staring at a new letter, unmarked, handwritten, folded with care. She opened it slowly. Inside, "I'm sorry, Mom. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I was scared. I let her decide everything. I miss you. No name. Just K." She stared at the letter for a long time, then reached for the tab labeled Collection and tucked the note inside, behind the seizure notice. Her past was still hers, but now so was her power. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving a pearly haze on the hibiscus outside Marjorie's window. She brewed tea and sat at her kitchen table with a thin stack of papers instead of her usual binder. These weren't receipts or subpoenas. They were something heavier, something final. A copy of her living trust, spread open like a map. Kevin's name was there, as it had been for decades, in the bequest section. Amber's name, too, added when she married Kevin. A neat little footnote of automatic inclusion, written in easier times. Marjorie stared at the lines for a long time, pen hovering. Then she began crossing out. Amber's name vanished first, a single stroke of black ink. Kevin's portion shrank to a modest percentage, enough to be symbolic, but not enough to feel entitled. And below it, in her deliberate teacher's script, she wrote, "Contingent beneficiary, Tyler Clark, education fund only." She underlined it once. When she set the pen down, she didn't feel vindictive. She felt measured. Like a teacher finalizing a grade she'd triple-checked. Later that day, Diane arrived with a slim leather briefcase and a portable notary kit. She set everything on the table, glanced at the revised trust, and nodded once. "You're sure?" Diane asked. "Yes," Marjorie said. "This isn't punishment, it's clarity." Diane unfolded her notary stamp. The sound of the metal clasp opening sharp in the quiet kitchen. "Then let's make it official." Marjorie signed, page by page, hand steady. Diane stamped each one, the embossed seal biting into the paper like a watermark of resolve. "Witness signatures here," Diane said. Frank stepped in from the back porch, where he'd been waiting with Tyler. He removed his cap, glasses perched on his forehead. "I've seen a lot of numbers in my life," he said softly. "But this might be the smartest investment you ever made." Marjorie gave a faint smile. "It's not about the money." "I know," Frank said, signing as witness. "That's what makes it smart." Tyler stood beside her, watching her write his name. His hands were stuffed deep in his hoodie pocket. "Grandma, you don't have to—" "I do," she interrupted gently. "You're the only one who didn't lie." He looked at the floor. "I just told the truth." "That's enough," she said. At the courthouse the following week, Judge Holloway issued a supplemental order related to the case. Amber Clark was to attend a certified financial responsibility course as part of the punitive damages ruling. It wasn't prison, it wasn't public shaming, but it was a record, a small but indelible scar. Amber sat at the defendant's table, jaw tight, staring straight ahead as the clerk read the order aloud. Kevin sat beside her, silent. His lawyer didn't bother to object. When court adjourned, Amber bolted without a word, her heels clicking on the marble like an accusation. Kevin lingered for a moment, then drifted after her, head down. Marjorie stayed in her seat until the room emptied. She exhaled slowly, like someone setting down a weight she'd carried too far. Diane leaned close. "You're officially free of them, on paper at least." Marjorie folded the court order and slid it into a new tab she'd brought with her, one she'd labeled Resolution. Her binder, at last, was nearly full. That evening, Frank brought over a small bottle of champagne. They sat in Marjorie's living room with Diane and Tyler, the four of them forming a quiet circle. The house smelled of lemon oil and new paper. Frank raised his glass. "To the smartest investment you ever made," he said again, "and to the freedom it bought you." Marjorie clinked his glass, and to telling the truth, she added, nodding at Tyler. Tyler blushed, ducking his head. Diane simply smiled, her eyes tired but satisfied. They drank. For the first time in months, Marjorie's chest didn't feel tight. It felt open. She leaned back into her chair and closed her eyes for a moment. The sound of their glasses setting down on the table felt like punctuation at the end of a long, grueling sentence. Later, after they'd gone, she stood alone at her kitchen counter, looking at the revised trust lying under the warm glow of the lamp. The ink had dried. Her husband's tie clip gleamed faintly where she'd set it. She placed her palm on the paper. She didn't feel guilt. She felt air, freedom. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. A new notification. She turned it over. An email from Diane. Subject line: "Their counsel just called." Settlement proposal attached. Marjorie opened it. Her lips curved, not into a smile exactly, but into something steadier. They're finally learning, she whispered. She slid the phone into her pocket, turned off the light, and walked toward the porch. Outside, the night air smelled like rain and cut grass. She exhaled again, slower this time, like someone finally filling her lungs after holding her breath too long. The binder stayed on the table behind her, but the weight of it had already lifted. The soil was rich from the rain, dark and pliant beneath Marjorie's gloves as she pressed her hand trowel into the earth. Her backyard, once only a modest stretch of grass and tired hedges, was starting to resemble something more personal. A curved line of pavers led toward a new bed of marigolds and lavender, bordered by small ceramic markers Tyler had painted for her between classes. He knelt beside her now, brushing damp hair from his forehead, squinting at the spot she'd just dug. "Too shallow?" he asked. Marjorie leaned over to inspect. "Little deeper. These roots want room to believe they'll last." He nodded and dug again. A light breeze rustled through the trees. Somewhere down the block, a wind chime played a hesitant tune. It sounded like peace. Inside the house, a stack of letters waited in a glass bowl on the table. She hadn't expected them to keep coming, but every week more arrived. Notes from neighbors, former students, even strangers who'd read the Sentinel story and wanted to tell her she wasn't alone. One note was written in wobbly cursive. "I lost everything to my own daughter's lies, but you gave me the courage to draw a line." Marjorie kept them all, not in the binder, but in an old recipe tin her mother had once used for Sunday dinners. It felt right there, among memories that had fed people, not broken them. By noon, the sun was warm on her shoulders. Tyler had gone inside to log into class, and she was just rising from the flower bed when she heard the soft crunch of tires on gravel. Diane's car. Marjorie dusted off her gloves and met her at the front porch. "All done," Diane said, holding out a manila envelope. "Final filings, probate protections, trust sealed and acknowledged." Marjorie took it, already knowing what was inside. Still, she held it like something sacred, something earned. "No more fine print," she said quietly. Diane smiled. "No more surprises." They sat for a few minutes in the shade, neither saying much. Just two women who had seen the worst of a family fracture and helped each other stitch around the tear. Before Diane left, she added gently, "If you ever want to revisit a full disinheritance, we can. But what you've done here, it speaks for itself." Marjorie nodded. "That's the point. I don't need to shout anymore." That evening, Frank stopped by with his usual spreadsheet tucked under one arm and a bag of oranges under the other. "I brought sunshine and numbers," he said, setting both down on the counter. They went over everything: bond yields, the college savings account, her medical fund, the line item estimates for the house upgrades she'd been putting off. "You're stable," Frank said with certainty. "Solid footing," Marjorie exhaled. "Then maybe next month I'll finally repaint the guest room." He laughed. "Use the expensive paint. You've earned it." It was almost sunset when the doorbell rang again. This time, she opened the door slowly. Kevin stood there alone. No lawyer, no Amber, no pretense. He looked older, paler, like someone still trying to wake up from a bad dream. "I know I shouldn't come," he said quietly, "but I wanted to say it in person." Marjorie waited. "I was wrong," Kevin said. "About all of it. About her. About what I let happen." She studied his face, the slope of his shoulders, the crease in his brow. He meant it, or at least he wanted to. "I never wanted to lose you," he said, "but I understand if it's too late." Marjorie opened the door wider, not to let him in, but to let the air pass between them. "You're my son," she said gently. "You'll always be. But she's out of my life forever. And the part of you that let her make those choices, that's gone too." Kevin's eyes glistened, but he didn't argue. "I don't want anything," he said. "Just thank you for answering the door. She gave a quiet nod. Then slowly, firmly, she closed it. She returned to the garden just as twilight settled across the beds. The marigolds were upright now, freshly watered and tucked in for the night. Tyler appeared beside her again, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Was that him?" Marjorie nodded. "Everything okay?" She smiled faintly. "Everything is what it needs to be." They stood together in the garden's hush, steam curling from their mugs. Above them, the stars began to prick through the dark. For the first time in a long time, Marjorie wasn't bracing for the next blow. She was simply still. And that stillness, it felt like power. The appeal arrived on a Tuesday, thin, desperate, and riddled with procedural errors. Amber had filed it herself. No attorney this time, just a bundle of photocopied grievances and a handwritten cover letter that rambled about unfair targeting, biased media, and reputational damage. Diane read it once, then again, just to be sure it was as weak as it looked. She smiled, dry and precise, and began drafting the motion to dismiss. By Thursday morning, the reply was filed. By Monday, she was standing once more in front of Judge Holloway, her tone calm but merciless. "Your Honor, this appeal is meritless and procedurally defective. The filing lacks certification, omits proper exhibits, and misstates facts already adjudicated. There is no new evidence, only an attempt to delay enforcement of judgment." Amber wasn't even present. Kevin had shown up in a wrinkled polo, sitting alone near the back. The judge barely blinked. Motion to dismiss is granted. Case closed, with prejudice. He stamped the order himself. The sound echoed. Back at home, Tyler met Marjorie on the front steps before she even reached the door. "They can't touch you anymore," he said, breathless with relief. She pulled him into a hug, her chin resting lightly on his shoulder. "Neither of us will ever forget," she whispered. "But now we can finally stop flinching." Inside, Frank sat at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of fresh coffee and the new bank statements open in front of him. He grinned when she stepped in. "The appeal's dead, and the payments still coming in like clockwork. They'll owe you interest for years." Marjorie chuckled softly. "Good. Let it take them as long to repay me as it took me to trust them." She walked to her bookshelf, where her old teacher's binders sat neatly in a row. The final one, labeled resolution in her looping handwriting, was open on the counter. She slid the stamped order inside the last sleeve, zipped it shut, and placed it gently on the shelf. No thud, no drama, just the quiet sound of something finished. That evening, she made a cup of jasmine tea and brought it to the porch. The sun was low and buttery, setting the marigolds aglow and throwing soft shadows across the walkway. Tyler sat in the porch swing, kicking it gently back and forth with one foot. Frank was fiddling with her sprinkler timer. Diane had left hours earlier, one final, "you call if anything changes," tossed over her shoulder. But nothing needed to change anymore. Marjorie settled into her chair with a slow exhale. A breeze lifted her hair. The scent of earth and citrus lingered on the air. She took a sip, letting the quiet nestle in, letting it stay. Her gaze drifted to the street, where neighbors passed with subtle waves and soft glances of admiration. No more whispers, just respect. She didn't think of Amber's voice anymore, or Kevin's silence, or the way her hands used to shake before court. That woman was gone. What remained was stronger, wiser, free. Tyler looked over. "You're really done, huh?" Marjorie nodded. "Done fighting, but not done living." He smiled, leaned his head back, and watched the sky darken. She sipped her tea again. The mug was warm, her heart steady. The binder sat behind glass, untouched now, just part of the record. And someday, Tyler would read it again. Maybe pass it on, not for revenge, but for memory. For proof that silence isn't strength, but standing up even when it cost you everything, that is. Marjorie looked at the last light slipping over the horizon and spoke, not to anyone in particular, but as if summing up the whole story one final time. I gave my son $13,000 to help with his wife's bills, she said softly, the words drifting into the dusk. But then I found out they took the whole family on a cruise and left me behind. So I made sure I was the one who truly set sail, while they were left with nothing. And she smiled, not out of spite, but out of peace, because the lesson had been taught, and it had landed.